From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and concerned citizens making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Assistant Professor in Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Integrated Pest Management, or IPM, is frequently pitched as a way to control pests and diseases in a way that minimizes impact to pollinators. You can pick up any guide to managing pollinators in agricultural landscapes, and you'll see there in the first paragraph the letters IPM. Now, IPM is often difficult to conceptualize because it is a conceptual model, and although many people use it on the ground, kind of making that connection between concepts and practices is really difficult, and that's where this episode comes in. I drove down the road from the OSU campus to Peoria Gardens, where I had the great opportunity to meet Nico Ardans. He's had 15 years of experience working with integrated pest management in nursery production, and this is a great episode where we get right into the dirt, literally. And see how integrated pest management works and how it's compatible and really kind of can promote overall pollinator health. This episode, I would like to also mention, is part of a larger project with the Western IPM Center. And there's going to be more kind of case studies coming in future episodes. This is also the last episode before the new year. I'm going on holidays, but I've got some great shows planned for you in the new year, so stay tuned. Have a safe holiday, and I look forward to talking to you and hearing from you in 2020. All right. Well, welcome to Pollination.
It's good to be here.
Well, here, it's great because I got out of the office. I drove down the Peoria Road from Oregon State University. We're still kind of Corvallis, Albany, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. Close, more Corvallis than Albany. Just across the bridge.
I'm looking, we're in this big, huge commercial greenhouse. It's really fancy. It's I guess, waiting for plants.
It is. It's getting a new energy curtain right now, which we actually were able to get grant money for. It's almost costing us nothing. But it was in bad need of it, and it helps us save a lot of money.
Well, I guess that's part of the reason I'm here today. We want to talk about integrated pest management and nursery production, and not just as, as a way to kind of like make production even better and use, potentially less pesticides or more targeted, but really relying on beneficial insects and by extension having these positive effects on pollinators.
Oh, yeah. We definitely try to minimize our use of resources and or maximize their potential. And this is an example of one of those, but IPM has helped a lot. I was given carte blanche with our program when I inherited the IPM program to just order whatever I wanted, and it made me nervous, but it saved us money in the long run. And while it hasn't reduced our number of sprays, it has reduced our volume of sprays.
Oh, fantastic.
By quite a bit. So,
well, let's start. I think we're right at the beginning. We're in an empty greenhouse. I guess all the poinsettias have all been moved out, and there's kind of starting, or probably already well into starting the next crop of plants.
Oh, yeah. We've got a whole lot of perennial production starting up, and when we get to the holiday season, it's going to be Christmas pretty soon, we try to move everything away from those days, and we end up piling it up on the weeks before and after. So we're getting through some waves of sticking a lot of cuttings right now.
Well, remember we were talking right at the beginning, the first stage to that kind of goal of really starting to rely more on beneficial insects and reducing the reliance on pesticides has to do with starting, like getting everything clean to start with as a kind of integrated pest management strategy. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, man. Starting clean is, I fight for that before moving on to anything else. I'm still fighting for it in our production, our propagation area. Our process just isn't set up for it yet, but it is a goal of mine this year to do that because I'd been told for years in poinsettias, that you have to start clean. You have to dip them when they come in, and it makes a world of difference. There's no way that we could get control.
What does dipping them mean?
When the cuttings arrive, they get dipped in horticultural oil. And a lot of people talk about, you can mix in all kinds of chemicals into your dip. Yep. You can go nuts. But I did some research and found that it's less than a 1% difference. The horticultural oil, which is just a fine mineral oil, does most of the heavy lifting.
So it protects the root from invasion because there's a little coating over it or something?
Well, cuttings will come in with eggs or nymphs or anywhere the insect is hidden, with the exception of thrips that'll lay their eggs in the tissue.
Yeah.
The oil will smother them, and without any kind of, REI or residual that's going to be a threat to people, really. So we just got to wear some gloves, and we dip them and stick them. And that keeps them clean for a long time until they come. Whitefly will show up from the environment or something.
But rather than have some, because you're in this space, I imagine, if you can smother them with sort of the mineral oil, horticultural oil, then a lot of those problems that come, you start clean when you start, and then you sort of don't have these flare-up of problems during the production cycle.
It's like buying a new car versus used. You're going to inherit these problems that you aren't aware of.
Box? I didn't want that.
Exactly. So if you start out clean, you've essentially got a brand new car. You can put some miles on it before you see any troubles, and hopefully you catch those before they hit. But if you don't dip, you've got spider mite eggs hiding underneath something somewhere, and they're going to come get you. And that's going to be a spray, and maybe you can catch it early, and it's a small spray, and that's still pretty good practice. But the best practice is to just eliminate it. And the oil's so cheap, and it's just you just need to submerge it. So you're talking like a second. So it's definitely worth doing.
Well, you also talked about, for disease management as well, you talked about like hydrogen peroxide and just making sure that you don't not carrying, after a production cycle, you're not carrying over pathogens from a previous year.
Yeah, and that actually ties back into the dipping thing too. Some people are nervous to do it because they're worried about propagating disease. And we were too, but there's some great trials carried out. I can't remember the university, but it's really difficult to propagate disease through the dip like that, it turns out. So you should definitely go all in on that. But for the rest of our facility, whenever a space opens up and a crop moves out, we try to come in right behind it to sterilize. And really, we just use hydrogen peroxide and a surfactant to foam up a little bit so you can see where it's active. And we've seen great results from that. We've tried all kinds of different chemicals and tried to, go to war with biofilm and stuff in pipes, which is always ongoing. But we've definitely saw a huge drop in diseases just from doing that.
Okay, so I'm getting one key pillar of integrated pest management, or IPM, is starting clean. Let's say, I guess it sounds like even with all your best efforts, something's going to emerge and pop up. How do you talked a little bit about, figuring out when problems are scouting. And when we were walking through the line of greenhouses here, you were saying, I'm often just, looking around for beneficials that might indicate there are aphid problems. Tell us a little bit about how you scout.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm always scouting. It's not something. That's not something I can turn off anymore. I spot cucumber beetles flying in the air, or you walk into a greenhouse and there's hoverflies all over the roof, and the presence of beneficials is that's an indicator that we're doing something right, because we're not killing them, which is the first way you shoot yourself in the foot. So our sprays aren't incompatible. And it also shows me that there's presence of some insect population in there. So we're really looking for you're studying an ecosystem, this whole synthetic ecosystem that we've built for these plants. And when I'm scouting in the crop, I'm looking for little aphidious wasps hovering around, they sway back and forth looking for the CO2.
How big is an aphidious wasp? I have no idea.
Oh, it's like the head of a pin. They're so small.
And you can see these.
Yeah. Well, when you get the plant in your face, but Yeah, we've got some established beneficials here that you can find in almost any plant now that you couldn't see before. It really helps, but like I said, I'm always scouting. Look close. If you don't find something, look harder, because there are insects everywhere. It's integrated pest management, not the complete elimination of insects. So there's always something to find, and if you are aware of it, then you're doing your job of monitoring it. And when it reaches a threshold, you can decide, do I want to control this with beneficials? Did I miss that window? Do I need to treat it with something? What is compatible I can use that's not going to get rid of these beneficials?
Imagine how nervous you get. This is a lot of money sitting on some of these benches. This is a huge investment. And if you don't quite have confidence in the system, it must make you not sleep at night. You can get pretty nervous. We don't do a lot of monocrops here. Poinsettias and our chrysanthemums are kind of the two exceptions. But I do get kind of nervous about it. There's a seasonality to everything, though, where we kind of know exactly what's going to happen before it happens and plan accordingly. Taking really good detailed notes is important. My first 2 years of doing IPM, I just had a whole bunch of notebooks full. Every day when I'd go out, if I'm, like I said, always scouting, when I see something, I write it down with a date. Here's the crop, here's what the pressure was, and here's what the pest was. And then I use that same list to formulate a spray strategy, and then return 10 days later to check up and see, is the spray doing what I wanted? What's the mortality rate? And I take those notes too. And that was really helpful too, because there are some chemicals chemical pest combos you don't want to waste your time or effort or chemical on. Don't need to unnecessarily put that into the environment, especially if it's going to be hurting beneficials. So I wanted to pick up on that. I heard you mention that earlier. And so the one thing is choosing a chemical that's going to kill the pest, but the other one is this compatibility issue of figuring out, because I think you've mentioned this before, where you use an insecticide, for example, on an insect pest, and your beneficials are gone, and the problem compounds. How on earth do you learn about compatibility of beneficials? Because it's not on the pesticide label, I imagine.
No, that would be really nice, wouldn't it? That would save me some time. Well, there are compatibility lists. I know the BioBest website, we purchase a lot of our beneficials from them, and they recently actually made a website, and I think anybody can purchase from them now, and they've got some good information up there.
This is one of the companies that produces insects, biocontrol insects. They've got a website that shows you this chemical will kill this one and this one, but not this one, and so you can...
Yeah, so you can put in what chemical you're planning on using and what beneficials you have out there, and it generates a matrix that shows you on a scale what is most and least compatible.
Really? Huh.
And that kind of helped me in the early days, but usually, there's going to be a canary in the coal mine. There's some chemical that just you can't get away from. Boy, we sure do spray this a lot because it works so well, and maybe take a second look at those, because I know we were doing a whole lot of abamectin to control thrips and mites. It's still great for mites, and it is still great for thrips too in certain combos with spinosad. It still works pretty well, and thrips are notoriously hard to control, but it kills all your beneficial mites and wipes out a whole bunch of stuff. I made a serious effort to reduce those sprays, and I said, I'm only going to use abamectin for either, some doomsday thrips spray, which there are other better strategies for thrips, so I've kind of moved away from that. But the only case that I use it on now is broad mites that are notoriously tiny and very difficult to control, and they're just something you don't notice till you've got the damage in the crop. So it's worth it to do that on a few crops, but I really hate doing it because since I've stopped, we've had such a huge increase in beneficials. In some of our houses, I get calls in the busy season when we've got seasonal workers here, and they're like, you got to come in here. This house is full of bugs. Something's wrong. Yeah. And, one of our Quonsets will be just loaded with hoverflies, and
their larvae will hunt aphids, and so it's great that they're around because we never had them before. We're seeing a whole lot more volunteer beneficials come out of the environment, like the huge hoverfly population, and a lot of Aphidius wasps. Aphidius colemani come out from outside a lot.
So these are not the ones that you purchase from
These are free.
These are free. They're coming in. Because the environment here, you've really dialed in your pesticide regime to be soft on beneficial insects. They're starting to come in, and you're getting that free pest control.
Yeah, it's not. I won't say that they never clean up a crop. I've seen it before, but a big part of IPM is timing, and the times that they do clean it up, it's when it's in their favor. Aphidius wasps do a great job of cleaning up aphids when it's still pretty cool. So spring and fall pansy crops, they could really do some good. Potentially clean up a few things here and there, but again, that's a good thing to scout for, because then you can see like, hey, they're controlling maybe half of the population, so I only need a chemical that's about 50%, to catch up the rest, and that helps us make our decisions. But we get a lot of beneficial insects that I didn't see before when I started. I even see lacewing now. Like, we never saw any of those the first couple of years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about the beneficials that you bring in, because I know the greenhouse industry and the nursery industry has really been on the forefront of the adoption of biocontrol insects and deploying them. Tell me a little bit about how that all works.
Well, the way that our production works is we get in cuttings for a lot of stuff. We do, germinate seed and everything, and order in liners too. But we get a lot of cuttings, and all that goes in all of our seed production also goes through our propagation house. It's our warmest house. It's our most bug-friendly house, especially since we added growing lights. However, the growing lights have really helped our root health. But everything starts in that house, and it starts out small. So in a small area, you've got plug trays that are holding 288 plugs per tray. That's a lot of plants. When it's out in a finished crop, that's going to take up a whole lot of space in the greenhouse. So potentially, you get more bang for your buck by applying insects out there. A lot of those plants don't have the same problems as finished plants outside of the greenhouse have, though. So it being a more moist and warm environment, we're typically looking at controlling fungus gnats. And that's what we started with.
What's the control for fungus gnats?
For fungus gnats, we use Stratiolalops, or it's also called hypoaspis. It's a soil mite. And just so listeners know, when you're looking at little tiny mites, the general rule, and I guess this applies to most insects, if they're moving pretty slow, they're probably a pest, probably an herbivore. They're moving fast, they're on the hunt, and they're a predator. So
that's a good rule of thumb.
When you're looking close in your plants and you see a tiny spider mite that's really moving across the plant or across the soil, that's a beneficial. And
cool.
And so we started putting out those beneficial soil mites into our production area, and you can, there are diagnostic techniques. You can put out like a cut up piece of potato out there to see when the larvae are present. And then you could spray with nematodes to go after those larvae, which is pretty cool. The timing has to be really right. What we settled on was just a regular schedule that's so cheap. Just get a couple 1 liter shakers of these hypoaspis mites and sprinkle them over our trays out there. And then from there, they get moved out into the greenhouse and hopefully carry those benefits with them long term. Those little mites, they do a good job, but they only travel like 18 inches in their life. So they don't really get around that much. So I decided to introduce another more mobile predator. We introduced a theta, a rove beetle. Again, a little teeny tiny little, looks like almost like a tiny little black earwig, but really small.
Oh, really?
The common name is like devil's coach. You can look that up. But they're highly mobile. They are a type of beetle. They do have wings and they can fly around. And before long, I saw them out of the greenhouse and in the office in front of the computer screen, just flying around my face.
So they have the advantage of being able to find little hot spots and focus in on them.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mentioned it because I think that's a key combo to having good efficacy to them, to have something that is going to really dig in and stick around, but also have something that's really mobile, that's going to go to where the pests are.
Right, makes sense.
But what's blown me away is that without ever having applied anything out in some of these other greenhouses, I can pick up any pot and find it crawling with Atheta in all life stages, and also soil mites, also the same hypoaspis mites everywhere.
In some ways, in that kind of, in the cuttings, by establishing it there, they kind of like, throughout the production cycle, they stay present.
Yeah, as long as we don't nuke them with an incompatible spray.
Yeah.
But that was the hope, and just this last year, I really, after some time being distracted with other things, got my nose into the crops, and I was just blown away by how just lousy with them we are. At the same time, I realized, wow, we really didn't have to do too much for thrips this year, and I'm not going to tout anything as a silver bullet for thrips, but it definitely helped.
Close to one.
It helped a lot, yeah. I mean, like I said, we didn't have to really do a thrip spray for anything. There's a couple crops where it's just like candy to them. Yeah. But in general, it's really helped a lot. Okay,
so we've got these biocontrols, and that's a great example of one that, and I love that dual strategy of kind of both biocontrol that might stick around and is going to persist through the crop cycle, but also something that might be able to redeploy itself. I can just see the brigades coming in. It's like, we need to move there.
There's another strategy that we employ that's kind of similar to that. BioBest produces, and really all these beneficial insectaries produce something similar. They make these, they call them breeding sachets. It's a tiny little white packet of paper, kind of folded over. It looks like a sweetener packet almost. Okay. But it's got a tiny hole in it, and it's glued to a stick of some sort. And you put them in the crop, and inside this packet, this is so cool, and I love telling people about this. Inside that packet, there's some bran, just like chaff in there. And it's inoculated with a yeast. The yeast is consumed by a bran mite that lives in the bran. The bran mites are consumed by a Cucumaris mite. Now, the Cucumaris mites are mobile enough because of they're predators. Yeah. They find that little hole in the packet and climb out, and they get in your crop. They control spider mites and thrips and certain end stars, certain phases of their growth. So it's not constant pressure, but they're there, and if they're there at the right time, they'll help you get control. And we had a huge problem of thrips damage on our pepper plants for the longest time. And I started putting these out, and it really worked to a point. Until the plant gets too big, then you're asking for more than 18 inches of travel distance out of a little mite. But it really works, and one reason why it's so awesome is that every time you water the plant, as long as that sachet doesn't get completely waterlogged, you're enabling that yeast to keep growing, the bran mites keep reproducing, the Cucumaris keep reproducing. I was thinking the analogy was in like slow release pheromones. It has like it has a persistence over time. Yeah, very persistent. I did a trial putting one on a sticky card, just held up, suspended by like a binder clip on a desk, not even in the greenhouse where I should have done the experiment. Yeah. But I did it on my desk, and for 10 weeks I watched them come out, and I was still getting 20 per day at 10 weeks, at which point I was amazing. Okay, I'm done watching this card. So I don't know what the upper limit is, but if conditions are right, they can just keep going and going. So for me, that's like a tremendous bang for your buck. And I put those into all of our mixed hanging baskets. I think I've gotten some of these. Yeah, I'm sure you have. Like customers call in asking about them all the time. Like, what the heck is this thing? They look like a little packet. I was wondering what they were. Yeah. Oh, great. They're amazing, and it's fun to look at under scope and see, is this one still producing? Is it not? But they've totally changed things. We've got certain foliage accent plants that go in our baskets that thrips love, and this really helps curb them. Okay, so
other thing I wanted to ask you, there's two more things I want to ask you about. The first thing was having kind of like plants that are kind of attractive to pests.
Oh, yes.
I thought I heard you talking about these, but what are these?
I can talk about that. Well, for us, having bait crops, they're called. We I don't know if we're going to deploy them this next year, but we have in the past, because somebody somewhere around us is producing some kind of brassica crop that flea beetles really like. And at some point in the summer, there's a harvest that happens, and
they all come over here.
When the wind is right, they just get slammed up against the greenhouses, and you can see a whole wall is just crawling with them sometimes. So we have early monitoring systems. We put up sticky tape to trap them. That works all right. But the one thing that we noticed was that one year they came in and they got on our alyssum crop and just ate all the blooms out. It was just green twigs left. But then we planted some outside to use as a bait crop, and we saw them show up early. They preferred that, so they got on it first, and it gave us time to do some organic sprays, because it was specifically affecting our organic crops the most. And we were able to keep them off and save a lot more plants.
All right,
so
fantastic.
It's not, I wouldn't call it the proper use of a bait crop, but it definitely helped. Ideally, we would have a hedgerow around the whole property, and I mean, in the future, I would like to get that going.
You've been talking. You've talked about that, and just to mention, one of the things as part of the grant, we've kind of done some profiles of people using integrated pest management. It can also help pollinators, and
yes.
On the video version of this, I heard you talk about hedgerows. Tell us a little bit about. It's probably a longer term plan for you, but what do you have in mind?
Well, yeah, I don't have much in mind yet at the moment, actually, but I would like to have a hedgerow that goes all the way around the property, except for the road here, so that way we can focus on beneficials out there. Looking at how many we've managed to coax out of our environment, if we can support them, I think we could get a lot more. But we've seen pretty good effects from what we've coaxed in from the environment.
Final question I have for you. You guys grow a lot of wonderful pollinator plants. Do you have any favorites that you think people should know about?
I really love Monarda, bee balm. Everything loves it. A lot of the bad bugs love it. You can find anything on Monarda. So if you love insects or plants, that's good. I like Echinacea too. It attracts a lot of stuff. That's like a double-edged sword, that question. Whatever the insects like, they're going to attract both kinds, good and bad.
Echinacea is a great plant. Both of those are great plants, and I have to say with Echinacea, always nice long bloom time as well, and it blooms at a time of year, in the state where a lot of things have sort of faded, and having some late summer blooms are always so wonderful.
Yeah, and in terms of like pollinators, I tend to think about sweat bees a lot. They pollinate a lot more than a honeybee does, but they reproduce a lot slower. Orchards really depend on sweat bees, and they're very, very susceptible to pesticides. And they're very tiny. They're very tiny, but the honeybee is non-native. It's from Europe. It's not a native pollinator, but these sweat bees are, and some of them like specific colored pollen even. But I'm always thinking about them. If I see them out there in the crop, I know I'm helping move us in the right direction. Because they're an underrated pollinator that do a lot of heavy lifting that just goes unnoticed, except for to bug nerds.
Well, and I imagine when it comes to small little bugs, that is your specialty.
Yeah. Like I said, never stop scouting. They're everywhere.
Well, thanks so much for taking your time, and we're really this has been a really helpful episode. I'm sure lots of people are curious about how pest management works in nurseries, and this is a really complicated and interesting system.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and encourage everybody to get online and do some research because, like I said, BioBest finally has a website, and I love being able to refer people there.
And we'll link it in the show notes. I'll put it in the show notes so anybody who's hearing this, you can go to the show notes and we'll have it there.
I'll give you a couple links to check out because there's actually a lot of resources available nowadays.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you so much for listening. The show is produced by Quinn, Sin, and Neil, who's a student here at OSU in the New Media Communications program, and the show wouldn't even be possible without the support of the Oregon Legislature, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, and Western SARE. Show notes with links mentioned on each episode are available on the website, which is at pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's several ways to connect with me. The first one is you can visit the website and leave an episode-specific comment. You can suggest a future guest or topic, or ask a question that could be featured in a future episode. But you can do the same things on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook by visiting the Oregon Bee Project. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.